Have you ever stopped for a moment and truly thought about how strange the human mind really is? Not in a simple everyday way, but in the deeper sense of how extraordinary it is that inside your head exists something powerful enough to create dreams, memories, emotions, fears, ideas, imagination, logic, and identity all at once. The human mind is the reason you can remember your childhood, imagine your future, fall in love, feel heartbreak, fear danger, create art, build civilizations, and question your own existence. It is the reason you can sit alone in silence and somehow hear a voice inside your head, thinking thoughts no one else can hear. It is the reason you can remember painful moments from years ago and still feel emotions connected to them as if they happened yesterday. It is the reason you can know exactly what you should do and still choose to do the opposite. And perhaps the strangest part of all is that while the human mind controls every part of our lives, most people go their entire lives without ever truly understanding how it works. We live inside our minds every second of every day, yet the vast majority of us barely understand the thing shaping every decision we make. Every word you speak, every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every reaction you have, every fear you carry, and every dream you chase all begin in one place, your mind. And despite all the technological advancements humanity has made, despite sending people into space, building artificial intelligence, and decoding the human genome, the human brain remains one of the greatest mysteries science has ever faced. In fact, many scientists consider the human brain to be the most complex object known to exist in the universe. Think about that for a moment. The same organ you use to read these words may be more complicated than galaxies, stars, black holes, or any machine ever created by human hands. And maybe that is exactly why humanity has spent thousands of years trying to understand it. Since the beginning of civilization, humans have been fascinated by one question above all others. What is happening inside the human mind? Why do we think? Why do we feel? Why do we dream? Why do we suffer? Why do we love? Why do we become angry? Why do we fear? Why do we sometimes destroy the things we care about most? Why do we act against our own best interests? Why do we sabotage ourselves even when we know better? These are not modern questions. They are ancient questions asked by philosophers, scientists, rulers, and thinkers throughout all of history. Long before psychology became a formal science, people were trying to understand human thought and behavior. Ancient civilizations believed the mind was connected to the soul. Philosophers debated whether thoughts came from the brain, the heart, or some divine spiritual force. Aristotle once believed that the heart, not the brain, was the center of thought and emotion. While that may sound ridiculous today, at the time it reflected just how little humanity understood about the mind. Yet even then, people knew there was something deeply mysterious about human consciousness. They knew there was something extraordinary about the fact that human beings could think, reason, reflect, and question their own existence. Over time, this curiosity slowly evolved into what we now call psychology, the scientific study of the mind and behavior. Psychology seeks to answer some of the most profound questions in existence. Why do people behave the way they do? Why do emotions exist? Why do people develop trauma? What shapes personality? What creates intelligence? What causes mental illness? What defines identity? What makes one person confident while another struggles with anxiety? What makes one person kind while another becomes cruel? What separates a healthy mind from a broken one? These questions matter because psychology is not just abstract science. It directly affects every part of life. It influences relationships, success, confidence, leadership, parenting, education, communication, business, love, trauma, healing, and happiness. Understanding psychology means understanding why people act the way they do, including understanding yourself. Most people think psychology is simply therapy. They imagine someone sitting on a couch, discussing their feelings, while a therapist listens and takes notes. But psychology is far more than that. Psychology is the study of human nature itself. It is the study of why humans think, feel, act, dream, struggle, grow, break, and heal. It is the science of understanding what makes us human. The modern study of psychology officially began in the late 19th century when Wilhelm Wundt established the first psychology laboratory in Germany. For the first time in history, the human mind was being studied scientifically instead of philosophically. Wundt believed the mind should be examined the same way scientists study physics or chemistry, through observation, experimentation, and analysis. His work marked the beginning of psychology as a legitimate science, but the challenge psychologists immediately faced was obvious. How do you scientifically study something you cannot physically see? Thoughts are invisible. Emotions are invisible. Memories are invisible. You cannot hold a thought in your hand or weigh an emotion on a scale. This made psychology incredibly difficult from the very beginning. Early psychologists attempted to understand the mind through introspection, asking people to examine and describe their own thoughts and feelings. But this method had serious flaws because people experience the world differently, interpret feelings differently, and often cannot accurately explain their own internal experiences. Soon, new thinkers emerged with different ideas. William James argued that instead of simply analyzing thoughts, psychologists should ask why thoughts and emotions exist at all. He focused on the purpose of mental processes and how the mind helps humans survive, adapt, and function. This perspective helped shape functionalism, which studied the practical purpose of behavior rather than simply the structure of thought. Then came Sigmund Freud, one of the most famous and controversial figures in psychology history. Freud transformed psychology forever by introducing one revolutionary idea. Much of human behavior is driven by unconscious forces hidden beneath awareness. Freud believed that people are influenced by thoughts, desires, fears, and memories they are not consciously aware of. He argued that much of what we do is controlled by hidden parts of the mind operating below the surface. Today, this idea seems normal, but at the time it was revolutionary. Freud believed childhood experiences, trauma, and unconscious desires shape personality and behavior throughout life. He introduced concepts like repression, defense mechanisms, dream analysis, and talk therapy. Whether people agree with all of Freud's theories or not, his influence on psychology was enormous. He fundamentally changed the way society thinks about mental health, personality, and human motivation. As psychology evolved, new schools of thought emerged. Behaviorists argued that psychology should focus only on observable behavior rather than hidden mental states. They believed if something could not be directly observed, it could not be scientifically measured. This led to groundbreaking experiments in conditioning and learning by psychologists like Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner. Their work showed how behavior can be shaped by rewards, punishments, and environmental conditioning. Later came cognitive psychology, which shifted focus back toward internal mental process like memory, perception, decision-making, and problem-solving. This field explored how people process information, make judgments, and interpret reality. Neuroscience then expanded psychology further by linking thoughts and emotions to brain structures, chemicals, and neural pathways. Together, these fields transformed psychology into one of the most diverse sciences in existence. Today, psychology combines biology, philosophy, neuroscience, sociology, and behavioral science into one integrated field. But despite all we have learned, the human mind remains deeply mysterious. Scientists still debate major questions about consciousness, free will, memory, intelligence, and identity. We still do not fully understand why consciousness exists or how subjective experience is created. We still cannot explain why two people raised in similar environments can develop completely different personalities. We still do not fully understand why trauma affects some individuals differently than others. We still do not know exactly why some minds become resilient while others break under pressure. This mystery is what makes psychology so fascinating. It is not simply about mental illness or therapy. It is about understanding every aspect of the human experience. Psychology explains why you procrastinate even when you know you should work. It explains why people stay in toxic relationships. It explains why confidence matters. It explains why fear controls behavior. It explains why habits form. It explains why trauma leaves lasting scars. It explains why people chase validation. It explains why social pressure influences decisions. It explains why childhood experiences shape adulthood. It explains why people compare themselves to others. It explains why rejection hurts. It explains why loneliness feels painful. It explains why motivation rises and falls. It explains why some people succeed under pressure while others collapse. It explains why your thoughts affect your emotions, and your emotions affect your actions. The more you understand psychology, the more clearly you begin to understand yourself and others. You begin to see patterns in human behavior that once seemed random. You begin to understand why people lie, manipulate, fear, love, avoid, sabotage, or succeed. You begin to understand why confidence attracts people, why insecurity repels them, why discipline matters more than motivation, why trauma can shape identity, and why mindset often determines outcomes. Psychology reveals that humans are not purely rational creatures. We like to believe we make decisions logically, but the truth is much of human behavior is emotional, impulsive, and irrational. People buy based on emotion and justify with logic. People make decisions based on fear, ego, insecurity, desire, and social influence far more often than pure reason. Understanding this changes the way you see the world. It changes how you communicate, how you persuade, how you build relationships, and how you interpret the actions of others. It helps you understand why people react emotionally during arguments, why leaders inspire followers, why marketers influence buyers, why crowds behave differently than individuals, and why perception often matters more than reality. Psychology also teaches us that the stories we tell ourselves shape our lives. Your beliefs influence your emotions influence your habits, and your habits shape your future. If you believe you are incapable, you behave differently than someone who believes they can succeed. If you believe rejection defines your worth, you fear social situations more deeply. If you believe failure means you are not good enough, you avoid risk entirely. Thoughts become emotions, emotions become behavior, and behavior becomes destiny. This is why mindset matters so much. It is not motivational nonsense. It is psychological reality. The way you think changes how you experience the world. But psychology also teaches something equally important. Your mind can be retrained. Thoughts can change. Habits can change. Beliefs can change. Trauma can heal. Confidence can be built. Emotional patterns can be broken. The brain is not fixed. It is adaptable, flexible, and constantly changing through a process called neuroplasticity. This means your mind is always being shaped by what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. Every thought strengthens certain neural pathways. Every repeated behavior reinforces habits. Every repeated belief shapes identity. In many ways, you are constantly programming your own brain through repetition. This is why routines matter, why habits matter, why environment matters, why what you consume mentally matters. The more you repeat something, the stronger it becomes in your mind. Fear repeated becomes anxiety. Confidence practiced becomes self-belief. Discipline repeated becomes identity. This understanding gives psychology incredible power because it means people are not trapped by who they used to be. They can change, they can grow, they can rebuild themselves. And perhaps that is one of the most beautiful truths psychology teaches. No matter how broken someone feels, change is possible. Growth is possible. Healing is possible. Reinvention is possible. The human mind is not only powerful enough to shape reality, but powerful enough to reshape itself. And that may be the most extraordinary part of all. The same mind capable of creating fear is capable of creating courage. The same mind capable of feeling pain is capable of healing. The same mind capable of self-doubt is capable of confidence. The same mind capable of destruction is capable of greatness. Psychology matters because it teaches us that understanding the mind means understanding life itself. Because in the end, every success, every failure, every relationship, every conflict, every dream, every fear, every ambition, every trauma, every victory, and every regret begins in one place, the mind. And perhaps the greatest journey any human being can ever take is not traveling the world, building wealth, or chasing fame, but understanding themselves. Because once you understand your own mind, you begin to understand your fears, your motivations, your wounds, your strengths, your desires, and your potential. And once you understand those things, you gain the power to truly change your life.